Hello friends, welcome to episode 73 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
You know, not too bad at all.
Not too bad at all, actually.
No. Had a wonderful dinner with some good friends.
Mm-hmm.
Had some nice dessert packed in there at the end, so we're all sitting here fat and happy.
Oh, pumpkin roll, man.
Pumpkin roll,
yes.
pumpkin roll. Now, do you say pumpkin or do you say pumpkin?
Oh, definitely pumpkin.
Okay.
Like, I mean,
okay.
there's letters in there for a reason.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but like, you know, it's also like the whole thing between pillow and pellow.
Who says pillow?
I used to say pellow all the time.
Why, though?
It was just the way it was.
Oh, God.
I know.
I'm so glad that you've grown up and, like...
Learn to read?
Yeah. Something along that way. You all right there?
Yeah, it's just our electric strip. I didn't want it to fall and like disconnect everything, and suddenly we're no longer live. I'll take a look at it later.
We've had 1 week with power issues. Let's
Yeah.
not have
Yeah.
multiple weeks of power issues. So, anyways, we have a show
We
tonight.
do. We have a revisit.
Hey, we kind of went digging through some of our older shows and just thought, like, you know,
Yeah.
what are ones that we want to go back and kind of touch upon, and you know, maybe that we didn't cover well enough the first time, or maybe that just, you know, bear repeating sometimes, or, you know, maybe we've got some different takes on them and stuff like that. And this is one of the ones that we thought we might want to delve back into, is something a little bit about storytelling styles.
I mean, I'll flat out be honest here. When we took a look at our show sheet from the original episode 13, I think the term hot garbage came up twice.
I mean, admittedly, like, what we had was a good discussion about RP games and different styles and stuff like that, but, like, it wasn't really clearly defined what we meant by storytelling style.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually had a really good discussion about that actually just earlier today, where we were just kind of trying to define that. And we kind of came up with the words like flavor or brand. Brand, I think, was the other good word that we came up with.
Yeah, I think it is the brand that the storyteller puts out.
Right, like, I mean, you know, for any of you who have had the pleasure of playing the same game system, but with different storytellers.
Yes.
You know, you'll know that each one of those storytellers had a different style of game that they were giving you, something different that they brought to the table. Regardless of, you know, I mean, you know, if you're playing D&D 5th edition,
yeah,
like D&D 5th edition is always D&D 5th edition. The rules are there, you know?
Yeah.
But I guarantee that those two storytellers' games were completely different.
Yeah. I mean, the same goes for, like, Shadowrun, is that, like, Shadowrun's, even though it's got a deep world that it's easy to identify regardless of who the storyteller is, game to game, it can feel like a dungeon crawl, or it can feel like a soap opera, or it can feel like a gumshoe kind of challenge. And it's just because of the way that the storyteller kind of follows the theme. Now, I'm kind of putting themes to this, but truthfully, it's how the storyteller tells the story and the methodologies that they use to impart their part of the story. And I do think that a storyteller's brand is the best way to put that. But I think we need to kind of define it a little better.
Yeah. So, what isn't a brand? It's not your theme.
No, because when we're talking about a theme, we're talking about...
That's an aspect of the story, not the storyteller.
Correct. We're talking, how are you taking the story that you're telling and presenting it? It's
not a feel or a mood, because, again, those are aspects of your story, and possibly of the game system. You know?
Yes.
Like if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, I guarantee you're not having a cheerful, bright, heroic, happy mood, you know, in that game. So...
Truth.
So, your brand is really more like what you as a storyteller bring to the table, and how you kind of make your own individual stories come to life. And sometimes your game system is going to inform your, you know, how well your style can come out, your brand can come out and stuff like that. Like if your particular brand is more like, you know, like a DM versus player, like
original old school,
School of Hard Knocks, original, just kind of old school.
What everybody thought D&D was, because you saw it like when you watched it on TV in like the 80s, or, you know, or someone, like a good example, what people remembered from E.T. was a bunch of kids sitting at a table and a DM kind of getting ready to murder them in a dungeon, you know, kind of a thing. Like if a player didn't die, something didn't go wrong, you know, didn't go right, you know. And that's it was more board game mentality than really role playing at that point. But it did influence a lot of people in how the game played and how other RPGs played.
But you're not going to be able to do that as easily. I'm sure you can do it, but you're going to be fighting against the system as it was intended to be played in something, say, like 7th Sea.
Without a doubt.
It's very difficult to be adversarial and kind of School of Hard Knocks about things when your next line out of your mouth is, that was awesome, here's a drama die.
Correct.
Yeah. Like, here, have a fate token.
Right. Huh?
Right?
Yeah.
So, but again, we wanted to point out that this isn't necessarily about how the game system runs.
Right.
But it's about what you as a storyteller bring to the table. And I think it's a very important thing to note about yourself and about others, because it can inform a lot of how that game is going to go. Yeah,
and I think it's almost more important in a lot of ways than what is being played for someone who wants to stay with the game. If you're going to a con, you never know what brand you're going to get. You're just going in for the story and seeing what happens. It's like going out to dinner at a new restaurant. You never quite know how it's going to end up. And then you have, your month to month or you're trying to find a group that you want to stick with. Mm-hmm. That's where brand makes a difference.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what game it's going to be in 2 years. But you know who the storyteller is going to be.
But if you know who the storyteller is, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, it's a little bit like, knowing a chef.
Yes.
You may not know what they're cooking, but if you know that they have a good command of, say, Italian, cooking and seasoning and spices and stuff like that, you know that anything they serve you under that flag is going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, my wife would definitely say sommeliers have something about wine. Is that if you're like, oh, who's the sommelier here? Oh, it's this guy. He comes by. Oh, okay, I know what kinds of wines are going to be here.
Exactly.
And his recommendations when he says something is dry, what he's really trying to tell you is it's going to suck your face clean dry. That kind of dry. And if he doesn't quite like it because it's too sweet, it probably is just a tad bit sugary. He really doesn't know what the word sweet means because that's not something he enjoys.
Oh, yeah. No, my ex-girlfriend introduced me to Mogan David and and Manischewitz, and oh my god, it was like, oh, so great. So great. That's how sweet I like my wines.
Yeah. When I say the word Lambrusco, it means something to you.
Uh-huh. Lambrusco is just a touch too dry for me.
That's funny but true. So, we actually discussed each other's brand.
Yeah,
because we have played with and a few other people.
We're calling you out tonight.
Yeah, we definitely will. You, Sarah, tend to have, like a slice of life is a good way of putting it, or realism. You kind of take everything in that breadth that it's a day-to-day kind of a process, and the people are very straightforward. There's not a lot of overt drama or unnecessary drama. Nothing's blown out of proportion. It's not gone to Telemundo level, drama.
Right. Deus mio.
Exactly. And because of that, what we know what to expect. We know that when something's changing in the environment, it has meaning. And I think that's, regardless of your game that has that brand, even your adventure game, which is larger than life by standard, you still made everything fit like a radio show opening. And the people you were interacting with, the villains had reason and drive behind them that was clear. But it wasn't anything extended or long, or didn't have like a 40-year history behind the dude of the reason why he was doing the thing. It was probably within the last 2 years of the reasoning why he was doing it, but he was also just a dude. He wasn't a villain to start with.
You may have one plot twist as a treat.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
your style too is probably about as polar opposite from mine as I could think of, because yours is extraordinarily cinematic and theatric, and I know those words sometimes get used as derogatories. These are just simply descriptors from me. When I say cinematic, I mean outright you have described scenes as if you were reading off of a movie script with actual camera direction.
I have
as
done
in, you see this, and then the camera pulls back, and and so it's easy to, at any game I am playing with you, to close my eyes and imagine it playing out on the silver screen.
Yeah.
With credits rolling and everything.
Yeah, I've done openings for games, like the opening montage of games where each player is a different, separate scene with a carrying image through it. I think I started one off with like a bird flying through a window, and you were following the bird through each scene.
Right.
You know, and I do my villains discussions that way too, because one of the things about 7C is not only do you get the player's perspective, but the players also get a bit of meta of what's going on that obviously will happen soon, but it's part of that story, and it lends to how do you move a view to something that the characters can't see.
Right.
And it lends to doing that.
See, one other thing you introduced me to as well with your particular storytelling style is the meanwhile scenes.
Meanwhile,
you will actually, at certain points of your story, and it's not something that always happens, but you've been known to do it a handful of times at least that I've been gaming with you, has been where you will just say, meanwhile, and then describe to us, like, what's going on with the villain.
Yeah.
And just give us a quick, how could they get away? How could you be so incompetent? I swear I will get them next time. I'm calling in someone extra.
Yes. El Duce.
And they don't even say who it is. Just like, don't worry about it. The next one will not miss. You have my guarantee. Anyway, back to you.
Right.
And
and
that's all we get.
You find yourself, on the road to Calais, know. The four, the two riders abreast with a carriage in between, you're in back getting drunk with you, and you're speaking with the Padre. He happened to, who you borrowed the carriage from, who's
Padre
also
Inglés.
drunk. But, like, it's just a style. It's what I do, and it's my brand, and it goes with me through all my games.
Yeah, I think it's
I mean, even my D&D games are basically the same way.
Exactly.
So.
And we know to expect that from you.
But we played with other people.
Yeah.
And we kind of pushed into that a little bit.
And this was kind of a fun thought exercise for us.
It really was. It really was.
To kind of figure out who, the other storytellers in our lives, a few of them, what their particular flavor was.
Yeah, especially because we've seen them in different systems.
Yeah.
Matt was one that we started with.
Matt, who is the Mad Elf on our Discord.
And does Mouse Guard for us most recently.
Friend of the show. He was also
on an episode.
On our show about mental health and gaming.
Yep, which we'll do again. We will definitely be doing that again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because since somebody was talking about therapy in games here recently, so we'll bring that back around.
That may come back up.
Yes. But you had described Matt's gaming style as a day at the park, and I loved the way you described it. But go ahead, I'll let you do that.
Okay, so gaming with our friend Matthew is like a day at the park. It is extraordinarily calm and casual, and he doesn't so much project a game at you as much as just invite you to sit on the bench next to him and experience a game. He's really good at creating atmosphere, but in such a way that it doesn't feel like he's creating atmosphere, that the atmosphere is just kind of there.
Yeah.
And you're in it.
Yeah, he's when you're dealing with someone like my style, where I'm presenting something, everything is done forward. You know when the music is about to start. You know when a scene is moving. You know when an action is about to occur. I'm preempting you to keep you there within the moment. Whereas with Matt, he's very, I'm not going to say subversive, but he's listening to the group while they're, talking through something, and then he might play a sound. Or he might drop a note or do something that adds to the scene, and you may not catch it immediately, but your brain notices that Matt's doing something. You're like, wait a second, are those birds? Yeah. Can I hear those? Uh-huh. Oh, God.
Oh, we're mice, and we're in an open field.
And those are ravens.
Birds is bad news. I hear caw in there.
Yeah.
Is there a caw in there? There is indeed a caw in there. Okay, run. And now suddenly we're panicking because he pushed one button on his phone.
Yeah. But and he's calm about it. He's just,
Yes.
We're the ones creating the intensity, and he's just slightly stirring the pot. He adds his little bit of spice, stirs a little bit more, lets everybody smell it, get used to it. They're waiting for it. But yeah, it's very much that. He is very casual in the way that he tells his stories. He's not and here's the and here's the fight, and here's this, and more of these, and he doesn't layer it like a cake. He just kind of hands it to you gently and says, "Would you like a piece of this?"
God, we were playing Mouse Guard, and like a snake
Yeah.
killed one of our compatriots, one of our contemporaries,
Yeah.
and like even that scene was just boom,
Yeah.
and the snake just
One and
gets him,
done.
and he's just gone,
Yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah.
There was no more drama to like. He was just like, and the snake just wham wipes this guy out.
Yep. Like
Okay,
a bus
and
hit
then
him
he
from the
just
side.
he just puts it right back in our hands to just react to.
Yeah.
Like, you have all the facts that you need right there.
Yep.
In the blink of an eye, this mouse was not a mouse anymore.
He was gone. And just like that, he's gone.
Up
and it was
like a fart in the wind.
Exactly. And then you have, we went on to talk about Chris, Overwatch, who is on Tesla right now. I don't know if you caught the picture in the other thing. He snapped a picture before he started driving but we're literally playing on his Tesla right now. I thought that was very nice. Glad to have you with us, Chris, although you're not messaging. Thank God, because you're driving. But his game style, when he brings a game to you, he brings the world. And not in the sense that he shoves all of it in your face at one time. He gives you what your character and what your group is experiencing in such detail that you can taste it right there in front of you. He does that with Shadowrun to such an extent that you're in Seattle. You know right where you are. You can feel the street crumbling under your boot.
Yeah.
You can feel it in the car as you're bouncing slightly in the back of the med wagon, bleeding out, while the doc is, cybernetic system is trying to work on a stim pack. He's getting slapped on your shoulder, gushing into your arm. And none of that is him giving you gory details or anything. He's just giving you enough spice across the top of it that you're there.
Yep.
And it's wonderful. It's flavorful. You can never leave his game without knowing right where you were through the whole feeling.
Man, and that is enviable, because I really aspire to that, to be that sort of storyteller.
And
I really do.
It's any world that he puts you in, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Shadowrun, whether it's D&D, no matter what. Like every game that I've ever been in, I've always known exactly what world I'm in and what's going on with that space.
Yeah.
To a tiny degree of like what's in the stuffer shack that I'm going to buy. That kind of stuff. Who the guy is there, why he's tired. Why, and if I saw a guard at the bar 2 scenes ago, that guy may actually be working at the Megacorp. And he's going to be drunk, he's going to be hungover because it's the next day.
Because he was at the bar, yeah.
Right, but he carries that kind of knowledge through each one of the scenes. It's the Chekhov's gun to an nth degree with him.
Absolutely.
And it's wonderful. It's so much flavor.
Absolutely enviable, honestly. Yeah. I think back to, like, a storyteller that... mind you, we were in high school, so none of us really were great storytellers back then.
Well, we were starting.
Back when I was playing BattleTech.
Oh, yeah.
And this was the particular person who was running our BattleTech game, and I remember the exact opposite of that happened, where we were chasing some sort of a saboteur through this military base, and he was like, okay, he goes into the barracks, and I was like, okay, so I go into the barracks too, what do I see? He's like, you see barracks? And I'm like, okay, what's in the barracks? It's a barracks. Okay, but, like, what are there, like, rows of beds? Are there separate rooms? Are there tables? Like, is there
lockers?
A mess hall? Is there, like, a common area? It's a barracks. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently, describe the barracks is too much to ask.
Right,
so, like,
right.
It's you're gonna run the gamut of all of them, I think. But
and we're not saying that at the beginning you have to find yourself. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about that, but the other thing is don't try and adapt to somebody else.
That's very valuable.
It's not bad to take things from other people and implore it if it's something you find yourself naturally wanting to do, but don't try and be Matt Mercer.
Oh, exactly.
Don't try and be a YouTuber who does something.
Yeah.
Be yourself, and that's really hard. And it's one of the hardest things for all performers to do.
That's why I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I mean, Matt Mercer ain't shit.
No.
He's not. He really isn't. He's not doing terribly anything particularly special, first
He's
off.
a talented voice actor.
Yeah.
He's a skilled storyteller for game systems, just because he's done it a lot.
Yeah, but also he does what works for him and his table.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
So you shouldn't try to be Matt Mercer because you're not Matt Mercer.
No, you're your own person.
Exactly.
And enjoy that moment.
And what you bring to the table, Technolich on our Discord, has said this numerous times. We're like, he can't watch Critical Role. Or I think maybe he's doing it now. I think maybe now that he's had a little experience with 5th edition and stuff like that, and he's kind of gotten back into the D&D scene, he's watching it. I think he's enjoying it now. But like we had an old discussion back, when he first started getting back into D&D, and he was saying, like, I can't watch Critical Role. This guy's entirely too serious for me. And that's because his storytelling style is casual and laid back.
Yeah.
He sees all of the theatrics and the voices and the music and the well-made maps and props and full painted minis and terrain boards, for combat and stuff like that. He sees that as just way over the top try-harding.
Okay.
And peacocking, essentially.
I see peacocking more than try-harding.
But he grew up in in 2nd edition D&D, where it didn't have, I don't think that level of gameplay was terribly well developed. And I think D&D was a lot more of a, couple of 20-somethings in a dorm room with a case of beer and a bag of chips.
Well, who do you aspire to at that point? What kind of, are you following a book author's descriptions?
Right.
Did you read Dragonlance, and so you have those visions in your mind and that kind of feel? And I think as we moved through our styles, I had nothing but what the material was in front of me. Right? And movies. And when I found 7th Sea, I found a lot of my storytelling brand. I found that when I was going through it, I could easily, they told me to attach to movies, what movies to look at, and that gave me a clear image of how I would invoke that story.
Sure.
But when I started with Palladium, I didn't have anything. And it wasn't until later, I'm going to say it, that I saw Turtles, and then read the comics. Like, I did that after the fact.
Yeah.
So it was a juxtaposition for me, for people being like, that's not TMNT. Like, haven't you read the comics? I'm like, no. And in all honesty, I saw Robotech as a Palladium property before I saw it as the anime.
Oh, yeah.
So when I eventually saw Lin May, it kind of shattered everything about Robotech for me, because, love is the most powerful weapon, and it's not even in Robotech anywhere until you get to Lancer's Rockers.
How many MDC does love do?
Apparently, if you read Lancer's Rockers, it does quite a bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I do not recommend it at the least. But the whole point of that is that when in our infancy of gaming, we didn't have a lot, and so a lot of those early tropes and designs were from books.
Yeah.
Because D&D never laid out good branding or styling.
Yeah.
They would give you descriptions.
There's plenty of rules.
And that those descriptions then led to you having to describe things. Hey, welcome in.
That was Overwatch arriving home. Sorry.
Yeah, we're glad you made it home safe. But because of that, we didn't have anything. So it was how you read it. Like, it was more of the tone and mood, but you never really had a brand behind it. It wasn't until much later that we all started developing these things and seeing how other people told stories and, like, getting comfortable or uncomfortable with other storytellers. Like, I got uncomfortable where I went to a game that, somebody had invited me to. They're like, hey, we've been playing this for a long time. One of our guys dropped, and, we'd like a new person to come in. I'm like, okay. And I went to the game for, like, 4 sessions. I think we got through in those 4 sessions, maybe 3 scenes.
Yeah.
It was really bad for me. It was not the way I wanted to play.
Yep.
It was just a lot of gabbing and some meta and not even role-playing, and we barely scratched into the game, and it was really bad for me. And yet they were very comfortable, and this is how they played. And I was like, I can't play this way.
They were all having a great time, and that's just because that particular storyteller style was that sort of just beer and chips sort of, let's just hang out, and if some role-playing gets done, then cool.
Yeah, or you get the other role-playing where it's, 2 minutes at the pub and 4.5 days in the dungeon worth of games, and then another 2 minutes, and then you're back in another dungeon, and that's just how the play. They don't do RP. They just do grind. It's a board game to them.
Yeah.
And great, that's fine. Again, not my style. I'll play that every once in a while.
Sure.
But, it comes down to how you move. And I think one of the things we said in in our original one was we talked about it as throwing a party.
Right.
How do you throw a party, or how does someone throw a party, kind of is a good inference on how they're going to do other things.
There's a lot of different ways to throw a party.
Yeah.
Sometimes a party is, hey, I invited 4 people over and we're going to order a pizza.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe someone should pick up some beer too or something.
But I think that's an interesting thing, because even now I think back and I'm like, how would Sarah throw a party? And I think about it, and it is very much, you have a lot of flavor you put, like, if you're throwing a party, there's a reason why we're all there, what we're doing there, but it's not overwhelming, and you're not demanding of the people to be there or not be there, and you're very comfortable with, like, oh yeah, they're going to play some VR in the other room, and we're going to sit here and watch this stuff, and oh, do you guys want to try this stuff? Oh, thank you for bringing that. That's fantastic. Let's just put some of that on ice or whatever. I'd love a glass. You're very casual with everything you do. I tend to have a bit more going on with mine.
So there's a party you throw every
I used to.
Or used to throw every year. It's been a few years.
It's been a few years.
Because
those
life has gotten in the way. But
those who know anything about it,
that has a title to it.
It does have a title to it.
Yeah.
It's called Sin and Gluttony.
Not for the reasons you think.
Probably
you
not.
Perverts.
But it started out with
it's a food party.
Yeah, it's a food and drink party, and everybody brings something, and we put little cards out, but we set up the house so that there's literally food everywhere. There's drink everywhere. It's conversation. It's drifting. And I'm literally moving through the party, mingling with people, introducing people to other people, interjecting stories to start something and then move to another group. It's just, it's the way I move through it. But it's a lot like my brand.
Yeah, it really is.
It's very cinematic. And there's anywhere between 40 and 70 people in my house throughout an entire day.
and you're very accommodating. You set up your basement as the introvert sanctuary.
It is true.
So yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is, I think back to the last party that I threw, and it was like, it's exactly like that too, where it was just like, I put out some hors d'oeuvres, I cleaned the house.
The VR party that we kind of basically threw together at the last minute, I think was probably the last like decent sized one, because there was like 10 of us around.
Oh, I don't know if it was even that much. It was
at one time,
8, 6 to 8, something like that.
But again, it was very similar to how you. So I think, if you go over to a person's house and you sit down, Chris is going to laugh at this one because he's going to remember the story. I got invited to a person's house where they were gaming, and I walked in the door, we were getting our stuff together. We moved into like the living room of the place. It was a nice house, and we're putting stuff down. And I've got my drink in my hand. I said, I look at the host, and I'm like, should I get a coaster? And they all look at me funny as hell. And he's like, oh yeah, let me grab you one, Rob. And I sat down, and they're all just staring. It's like, what the hell kind of shit is this?
A coaster.
But like, it literally set up my relationship with that guy completely. Of like, this is how we're going to interact. This is the level at which we're comfortable with, our hosting commonalities. So I know how he would run a game. I can feel it.
They're looking at you like, cricket? Nobody knows how to play cricket.
That's right.
You got to know what a crumpet is to understand cricket.
Thank you for bringing that movie around.
Yeah, right.
That's the second reference, at least, if anybody gets that one. So yeah, I think parties are great. I mean, is it beer and chips? Do you clean your house? Do you get, everything ready? Or do you literally have a dinner party?
Yeah.
Like, I can't throw a drinking whiskey party without China. Like, I just can't. Like, I have a hard time throwing a light party.
Just the fact that you throw drinking whiskey parties.
I did.
Whiskey tasting parties.
It was a tea party, which was really whiskey out of teacups. And by the way, that makes a huge difference. So, yep. Thank you, Overwatch. Turtle Power. I'll definitely take that. But yeah. So where do people fit on that scale? Like, is it the system? Is it mechanics? Is it the type of game you're playing? Like, what helps inform you as a storyteller of your brand?
And I think that the systems you trend towards are going to be largely informed by your style,
if you know of them.
If you know of them, but I think at least in my experience, I find I like systems more that are concurrent with my style, and find that I chafe against systems that are outside of my style.
That's a terrible word, but it's a perfect one for this.
So, for instance, like 7th Sea. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoy playing 7th Sea, and I will show up to your table anytime you say you want me there for 7th Sea. Like,
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I love it when you run it.
Yeah.
I would never run that game. I
don't think... Yeah, it's not...
I wouldn't be bombastic enough for it. I wouldn't be dramatic enough for it. In fact, that's kind of one of my worries with something like adventure is, am I going to be entirely too mundane for this?
No, because you bring a different... Like, I think you could take adventure to that level, but I don't think it's necessary. But it's the same reason where, like, I look at something like City of Mist, which can be very cinematic, but really it's up to the players.
Yeah.
And for that, it almost scares me a little bit of, like, I have to bring myself back. I'm setting a scene and then walking away effectively.
Yeah, but I think for at least City of Mist, and especially the character you're playing in our City of Mist game...
Playing, not running.
Right.
It's a mystery.
But
I
think that the thing is, because in City of Mist, you play as an incarnation of some sort of legendary thing, whether that's like a god or a living legend like King Arthur, or even, the wielder of some sort of weapon like Excalibur, or, something like that.
Right.
You are legendary in some sort of way. But I think what you're playing informs how, dramatic you would be.
How far you can go with your brand.
I mean, like, my character is going to be, probably aggressive and self-assured, because I am playing the incarnation of Artemis.
Right.
Your character, on the other hand, is playing the great storyteller Scheherazade.
Yep.
And so I expect you to be a little bit flamboyant about that, and you are.
Yeah.
So I think it's more like what you bring to the table there.
Truth.
But as far as, how you run the game, yeah, I'd say it probably
So the mechanics weigh into it, whether it's heavy mechanics like hack and slash or freeform narrative, kind of pushes you toward a brand. You'll accept it one way or the other. So now we got into a little discussion about episodic versus campaign arc affecting it.
Yeah, because I know there's... So, like, for me, I know you and I have had some long discussions, and I think probably some of these discussions that you and I have had more recently actually led to the creation of this show.
Totally. I think specifically this.
Yeah. Was, how do you set something like this up? Because I have never felt good about the overarching, sweeping, meta campaign.
And yet I have a hard time writing something freaking simple.
You do.
Like, the first thing I do is like, oh, this is a town about some goblins in a cave that are affecting a farm. That's it. It's that simple, right? And I'm like, no.
And
what's
3 minutes later?
Yeah.
He has 3 years worth of plot.
I know what's going on with the mothers of the goblins and the deep dwarves that are affecting the goblins.
A butterfly flapped its wings on the Sword Coast.
It probably farted, honestly, and that's all it takes. So.
Yeah, and so now there's a hurricane in Thay.
But that's, I mean, it's how it has always worked in my mind.
Yeah.
So it's challenging for me to pull back those layers.
Whereas for me, it's difficult to put those layers on because my storytelling style, as you said, is very slice of life, very down to earth and grounded in reality.
Yep.
And so I tend to think on the micro rather than the macro.
Correct.
How is the situation right now affecting Joe the farmer, not the entire nation of Cyrodiil?
Right. Right.
And so you and I had these big discussions about how do you put those layers on there? How do you make all these moving parts and make it feel organic? And then, what if your players go off the rails on that?
Right.
Just because it's not my particular.
Is it really off the rails? We're going to eventually get back to redoing those stories, but effectively
that's a different discussion. But that's what got us into this topic. At least,
and I think it helps. It helps you as a storyteller figure out what are the you don't have to be one or the other. You can fit in between those two.
Right.
But I think a lot of storytellers go one way or the other on that.
But I think your storytelling style is going to inform a lot of how your game or possibly your campaign, if that's something you're doing, rolls out.
Yeah.
For me, I tend to have very small, bite-sized plots because that's what I, as a person and as a storyteller, can conceive of and hold in my mind.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Like, we talked a little bit about the monster of the week sort of episodic gameplay.
Yeah.
And what it means to be truly episodic.
Right.
And you were like, well, yeah, my storytelling style is a little bit episodic because I wrap up, I try to put a cap on my plot every week. And I said, well, first off, that's a lie.
It's true.
You do not cap your plot every week. In fact, you leave us on some sort of a cliffhanger. It's not huge cliffhangers.
No.
But last game session, we got to a town, and a man I have never laid eyes on before walked up to me and said, "Oh, good, you're home," and planted a gigantic kiss on me. And scene.
And scene.
And that's where we left it. So, no, you don't get to say that you wrap your plots.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
I'm calling you out right here on the air.
You did.
But the fact is, though, is that your plots are very long and overarching. We're still dealing with stuff that we were dealing with in the very first game session of your game,
11 plus years ago.
11 plus years ago.
Yeah.
So that's not episodic. What we're talking about with episodic is when you can completely detach every game from the other.
Right.
Where it truly is the monster of the week. And that's a perfectly valid game style. You don't have to do the big campaigns that last for years. You can, hey guys, we're going to crawl a dungeon. Cool. Okay, this time we're going out into the countryside and we're fighting a troll. Cool. This week, we're going off to this other farmstead and we're fighting some ogres that are doing some interesting things with magic these days. Cool. And that's it.
Yeah.
Like, you may use the same characters.
Yeah.
But there's no plot. There's no connection between the dungeon and the troll and the ogres. They're just things that you were doing that week. And if that's your storytelling style, that's awesome. And if you do run an 11-year campaign, that's also awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Knox says episodes you can watch in any order.
Yes.
Yeah, that
exactly.
is true episodic. You're 100%
episodes you can watch in any order. Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
If you're familiar with the books.
Yeah.
Is episodic.
Yes.
Because Arthur Conan Doyle actually specifically wrote those so that you could just pick up a novel
and read it and be fine. Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. I 100% agree. Another one that does that really well is Poirot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Hercule Poirot. Yes, I'm saying that right. I love it. Like I will watch that any day of the week, and I can watch any of them. And I'll be perfectly fine. There's a few that have gone over 2 episodes just because of the type of story they were. They just need more time with it. But for the most part, you can just pick them up whenever.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
Occasionally there's a tie-in here or there, or a repeating character, but...
Or death of a character or something like that. But I think it's more along the lines of that it doesn't change anything within the immediate story.
Exactly. Yeah. Just the absence or presence of that character, it does not necessarily, put those stories in such an order that it is important you read one before the other.
Correct. So then I think the only other thing that we wanted to throw at this was the gritty realism versus the cinematics, the ends of the spectrum.
Right.
Like, where do you fall into that? Because, you've got storytellers who will add gritty realism at times or add heroics at times, but really it comes down to how do you see your players? Like, are you rooting for them all the time? Are you holding back bad rolls and things like that on the DM screen, because you want an expectation of some kind of hard push to have a high success and feel triumphant? Or do you play with your dice open and like, this is how it's happening. It's just what it is.
Yep.
And I think that's that kind of difference between, how do I say, escapism, true escapism, and having a more, no dying on mic, and having something that is a bit more truth. Because we deal with truth every day, but some people love games that are very rich and true and hard and harsh. They want that extra edge of things that I want to feel my game. I want to bleed in my game. And then everyone else is like, can I just play with a pile of puppies?
Right. Can I fly and throw some fireballs or
exactly,
something?
Exactly.
It's what I'm here for, And that's what why you don't see McDonald's the role playing game,
Exactly.
And I get that. But some people do like to tell stories that are the reason I trend towards realism, and I wouldn't say I trend towards gritty realism, because I don't think I throw grit in there.
You don't.
I think I want to on some level.
I think you lean into it as a feeling.
Yeah.
But I don't think you tell gritty, realistic stories.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where we're at with that one.
Yeah.
But
I can throw some gritty realism in my cinema, but it's for a plot reason.
But it's for cinematic reasons. Exactly.
Right.
It's just to make things more dramatic.
Correct.
It's syrup on your pancakes at that point.
Exactly.
But for me, though, the appeal of realism is that, sure, we're all here for escapism, but at the same time, the less you have to imagine, the less you have to go out of the scope of your own experience to put a scene together in your mind and experience it and be there, is less work that you have to do and more work you can put into things like your role playing, or your character stats or things like that. You have to reach less far in a game like mine, where you've got realism as a basis for things.
Right.
However, like you said, though, not everybody wants realism because we're here for escapism. We're here to tell a fantastical story, not this is how I starved to death on the 3-day journey to, to a foreign village.
Yeah. And knowing which storytellers give you that is a huge thing.
And on the other hand, your gaming style is very cinematic, which is great because I know exactly where to go for escapism. I know I am not getting anything close to reality with your game.
It may be spooky and scary and gritty at times, but it's still going to be a show.
Exactly, but it's all over the top. It's like the Moulin Rouge of role-playing game.
Kind of, yeah.
But at the same time, though, I have found that sometimes in your game, I've found myself grappling with putting a scene together in my head just simply because the levels of theatrics going on sometimes are out of scope for me as a player.
Mm-hmm.
And
some of the face stuff that I did, and
so I'll have to wait, hold on a second, what's going on with this, and just kind of double check myself to try to make sure that I'm keeping up with the story,
right? Right.
So there's pros and cons to both, clearly.
Oh, totally.
And so finding, being able to identify kind of where you are on that spectrum, I think is very, very useful.
Yeah, and coming into it and understanding it, I think sometimes helps talking to your players about it. Like, I see that I'm cinematic, and knowing that that's what people look for, like, it kind of helps. It helps me to say, okay, I'm going to lean in and keep going with that because it works for me.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think that what we're coming down to is the point of this whole discussion. Why storytelling styles and why identifying them and being able to, kind of see what the different flavors or styles
brand,
are, what your brand is important.
Yeah.
And that is, so as a player, you're going to be better informed what to expect out of a particular game from a particular storyteller.
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, I don't, Rob can invite me to some game I've never even heard of before. But I'll tell you what, if Rob is running it, kind of already know the experience I'm going to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. It's what the chef is bringing to the table and knowing that chef.
And it also, you'll know what's expected of you as a player at that storyteller's table.
Yeah.
Okay. At my table, you're getting a slice of life, realistic style game.
Yep.
And so that your experiences, you should probably keep a lot of your more theatrical backstories and gigantic, earth-shattering. Like, you're probably not going to get a save the world plot out of me with, gods warring against, demons and stuff. That's just not the thing.
But also as a player, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of minutia here, but like, as a player, you also now know that this storyteller is okay. Is one of those ones where you might want to have a backup character ready to go because they may just kill you.
Sure.
Or under the same note, you should probably know the system pretty well because they don't take kindly to you sitting there for 10 minutes searching for your spell notes.
That's also true.
So I think there's a bit more to the brand in the minutia as well, but it's not so much their style as far as the game's concerned. It's their care of the system as well. So,
and then so as a storyteller, it informs you what game systems might be easier or harder for you to run.
Very much so. Very much so. And what you can recommend to someone.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I grew up on Palladium. We've talked about that a while. And Palladium is a very rooted in reality. Like, there's not a lot of cinematics to it. It kind of...
No.
It
it's
purports to give you a comic booky feel, but I never found that was particularly true.
It depends on the comic book, I guess. Is it a Punisher comic booky feel, or is it a Superman comic booky feel?
Exactly.
I tend to lean toward the former.
I always found the Palladium emulated reality as much as it possibly could.
It was very connected to it.
It was very connected to it. And maybe that informed my roots. Maybe that's why I run a very realistic game, is because I grew up on Palladium for so long.
Palladium, BattleTech, all of that, yeah.
Yeah. But, on the other hand, though, there are systems that may be harder for me to run. Systems that are more cinematic.
Yep.
So reason I haven't run Urban Shadows yet.
Yeah.
Because the game scares me, frankly. It feels a little out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because I'm not one to do mysteries. Like, I have a hard time working with mysteries as a general in my stories. My mysteries are larger. They're about people. They're not about, intricacies and connecting, the conversational dots, if you will. But I honestly say, I think it'd be something that, like Chris would be fantastic at. I think that kind of thing he could devour it. So I could see where it's easier once you know someone's brand to be able to recognize what they might be great at. So we're comfortable with.
Identifying your own brand also gives you, allows you to kind of identify where your own boundaries are.
Yes.
So you can start pushing on your own comfort zone.
Which is important.
There's that old adage, know thyself. To thine own self be true. It's kind of goes the same thing for, in all things really, but for storytelling specifically. If you can identify what your particular storytelling style is, you can then work on kind of pushing those boundaries.
Yep.
If there are things you want to try to bring into your game system, your games, or if you see in another storyteller something that you inspires you, and you may want to try, things like that, you can start pushing in those directions. But knowing where you're at right now is very helpful for then developing a style that you're looking for.
Okay. I agree with that. And I think also to a degree, if you're trying to get to a level of brand perfection, you know the components that you're working with.
Yes.
And you can become a master at that. And if you're one of those people who need to master something, this is a good way to form it.
Yes.
Is to design a brand for yourself and master it. Feel comfortable with it. Because I know some people will not move to other systems because they don't want to be challenged by them. They want to learn that level of perfection. And by all means, work on the brand.
Absolutely. You want to hit some questions?
Totally.
All right. Let's start at the top.
Okay.
Knocks in the box.
Sure.
Throws in a question. Good. You guys joke about Wednesday show nights being your therapy sessions. We joke about it. Yes.
Yes, it's true though.
Such a funny joke. But what about campaigns where therapy over story is the focus? Is that type of storytelling? Is that a type of storytelling style? What about games designed to strengthen social skills or better manage obstacles for learning and education?
This is a topic that we've actually wanted to do in the podcast.
Yeah.
Do a show on it. We've got a couple people that we've spoken with. The hard part was COVID kind of messed with us being able to do any good interviews or bring people on the show. So we will be coming back to this, definitely. Because as much as both of us agree that gaming has a level of therapy to it, and has a level of social involvement and assistance. I'll use those terms.
Right.
If you're not getting a social interaction, it's a way to get a social interaction. But neither of us are on a level that we can communicate about it in a way that I would say
is informed or educated.
Yeah, without crossing boundaries, without concerns. But we do know people, doctorates in fact, who could speak on this topic relatively comfortably.
Yeah, exactly. I guess to directly answer your question, it's not really a storytelling style. It would be more of... It's really kind of more of an overt purpose to the game. I mean, most of our games are assumed to have the purpose of just hanging out with friends and having a good time. But I think if you're, if you do have a game where you do have a specific purpose for therapeutic purposes or developing a particular skill, overcoming some sort of an obstacle or social issue. I think that's if you feel safe enough in your gaming group, I think that's the most important thing is to make sure that you have a safe space.
Yeah.
And that everybody at the table is okay with using the game for that purpose. And I think as long as that's communicated and stuff like that, I think it's a great place to do that. Like, I know, dealing with a lot of my own like gender and sexuality issues and stuff like that. I tried out characters at the table that were my inner expressions before I ever expressed those things outwardly in the real world, because it was safe to do so.
Okay.
And just little things like that, because role-playing games can be a very, like, there's no consequences to them.
Yeah, I mean, there are games that are engineered toward social interaction and development. There's a superheroes game, I want to say that's called, like, Teens or something like that, where the game is not about the superhero side so much as it is the when you take your mask off, that part of the life. And so you're working through the struggles, the day-to-day struggles that these superheroes are dealing with.
Yeah.
And their connections with other people. And in some cases, like, there's a different, I think it's either a different story, the same story, or a setting where you could be a teen and have, like, be your Peter Parker kind of person, or you could be an adult who actually has an adult relationship with a villain.
Oh.
But, I mean, you guys are not cool on the supervillain scale, but, like, you guys have to work together on the social scale. And how do you handle that? Like, how do you deal with those levels of demons,
Is it called Masks?
It might be. It might be Masks.
Okay,
it might be Mask.
Knox dropped that in the live chat.
Because it was told to me by someone else, and I have not gotten a chance to go back to it. But I've been wanting to look into that one. But again, it's much more social interaction than anything else.
Yeah. I would just I suppose wrap up this answer by saying that just be careful with the quote unquote therapy game.
Yeah.
I guess really unless you're like a licensed social worker.
Even
therapist,
then, you know where to be there to be careful about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not there to emulate and handle a situation that was hard. Like, don't try and have someone relive a scenario better or handle a situation better. That's probably not going to work out. But again, there are licensed people for handling those situations.
Exactly. And they may employ some sort of role-playing, but that's a therapy technique and not a game, necessarily.
Correct. So, all right, Sam's got a question here.
All right.
What are some basic, easier styles to try when you're just starting out as a storyteller? Some that a new storyteller can try to see if it fits for them and their party best. I would say a few things like we were talking earlier. See how you feel about trying to do simple versions of everything. Don't try and go and make things cinematic. Don't try and make everything into an overarching super plot. Don't try and have every single character have deep, NPC have deep, meaningful roots and things like that in it. Start with one thing. Find one little part that intrigues you. Maybe it's something about do you prefer to watch giant movies that are, larger than life and have adventure and excitement and scenes and camera movements and things like that? Or do you tend to lean toward TV, where each episode has a wrap-up point within it that you're comfortable with, and you come to a closing, and the next-gen episode is them on the same ship again, handling something slightly different, so that you can easily move through those. Now, on the other hand, grab a default module and flavor it up. Give it a little bit of gusto. Make it, talk about the drama of the characters. Make your villains larger than life in the way that they, talk or something like that, if that's something you want to lean into.
I'm going to say I can think of really two things that I would suggest to new storytellers.
Okay.
The first is kind of to piggyback off of yours.
Okay.
Think about your favorite book think about your favorite movie, think about your favorite TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Do all three of those.
Right.
Okay. And I don't care if it's something like Great British Bake Off.
Sure.
I mean, perfectly valid. Like, Real Housewives. Like,
Sure.
Okay, that's fine. Whatever your favorite TV show is, think about why it's your favorite TV show.
What about it?
Give it some really good thought of, like, what about this particular show really, tickles my fancy.
Is it the visuals?
Great British Bake Off. I like it because of the format. I like it because it is bite-sized and episodic. Oh, okay, there's one thing that I can translate into storytelling.
Yep.
And because I like to get to know the little bits of interesting character and lives behind the bakers. Obviously, I like the cooking, but I like to know who's doing the... So I like slice of life. I like character-driven stories.
Sure, perfect, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you start thinking about your favorite book, your favorite, movie. Do you like them for similar reasons?
Yeah.
Maybe you like them for different reasons.
Yeah. Or I like the way the person describes these scenes. I like the way that, I can visualize myself sitting just a little way from the character as they're moving through this.
Exactly. Okay.
Yep.
So think about those things and see if you can pull your favorite things about about the media you consume into your own game.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are things that clearly resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be the things you're going to be easiest for you to emulate them.
Exactly.
The second thing I would suggest is just to kind of, like, for new storytellers, obviously running the game is going to be a challenge for you. You've got no experience. You've got no, you're still finding your own ground and trying to run a game on top of it.
Yep.
That's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
Understandably. It's intimidating.
Right.
So little things you can add are things like music.
Mm-hmm.
Music is extraordinarily easy, especially nowadays in the technology age. You throw up in YouTube Music or Google Play Music or Spotify or something like that. There's a bunch of stuff you can find online that are playlists that are good for games, and it's very easy just to quick tap a button on your cell phone or something.
Yep, and you can just have it play out, or even just sound effects, like a soundboard type of thing, can be very simple. Where you're like, there's an owl sound or a door creaking, like your typical thing like that. Just add a sound effect here and there to give a flavor.
And the other thing I would suggest too is props.
Always a good idea.
You don't have to be really elaborate, but like if you have a note that someone is supposed to receive, type the note out.
Yep.
Just put a fancy Old English font on your thing, print it out, something like that, and just hand it to the player. I guarantee being handed a note is much better than being told a note.
Exactly.
So little things like that you can try to add some flavor.
Okay.
All right, so we've got one question left. I don't know if we have time for it, though.
It's a good question. I'll put it out there, and then we may come back to this next week. That is, Overwatch asks, there appears to be a trending style from more tactical, crunchy-type games to faster, looser style becoming prevalent. Emerging games can often cater to this. Is one of the results of the other? Do you think it came first, or trending style, or the games encouraged it? Honestly, this is a kind of longer question. It's part of that overarching thing that we keep discussing about, is there kind of been an evolution in games?
Yeah, I think
or regression.
I think this is Game History 301.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to hit this. I think this is going to be a topic that you guys will hear from us. But in fact, next week we're actually going to be starting a mini-series on encounters.
Yep.
So we'll be discussing some of this in that, and hopefully you guys will stick around and see it with us as it goes through.
Yep.
So you can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram at @ST_conclave. If you're listening right now on MixLR, you can find us there at mixlr/storyteller-conclave, or our Discord link, which you can find in our Twitter, or on our storytellerconclave.com website.
I want to give a big shout out to our Patreon members. Thank them so much for supporting us every week. Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, and Sparkle Motion, new Patreon. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find her at soundcloud.com/Midair Machine.
We'd like to say thank you to our families. Sean, Vicky, thank you so much for supporting us all this time. All of our friends who play our games with us and keep these stories coming every time. And the storytellers we've listened to over the years and enjoyed their brand. And of course, you, our listeners. Thank
love
you
you.
ever so much. We love you.
Good night.
Good night.